So, it's Eccleston month here on the Whonviersals. Look, I've said this all before, I love the Ninth Doctor, he's one of my favourites, but he's frustratingly hard to write analytical content about because I feel like anything I could say has already been said. Series 1 has been picked pretty clean by the Doctor Who community over the years, to the point where I'm at a loss on what I could add to the discussion. And since this 13-episode stretch is the extent of the Ninth Doctor's on-screen existence, yeah, that means I don't tend to bring him up much. Besides, the demand for us at the Whonviersals to cover 21st century Doctor Who doesn't seem particularly high anyway. This channel seems to be the rare place where classic Who content actually performs better than revival-focused material. I suppose because other, more popular channels have the monopoly when it comes to the latter. That's fine by me, I find classic Who more interesting to dissect, but that means when I do decide to tread on more recent ground, I feel compelled to be somewhat subversive. So, Vidigame. Doctor Who has had a volatile and frankly lackluster output when it comes to video games, with its numerous interactive projects over the years ultimately painting a curiously underwhelming picture. The LEGO Dimensions level pack may genuinely be the franchise's biggest achievement in this field, because it sure as hell ain't Return to Earth for the Wii. That said, one specific subgenre where these attempts received some goodwill was with browser games. During the 2000s and early 2010s, Doctor Who's online presence was very flashy, in a macromedia sort of way. Multiple officially licensed websites hosted online games that functioned on this software, the most prominent of them being the main site's collection based on elements from the RTD era. While not revolutionary by any means, some were essentially just glorified puzzles, they were cute time wasters that helped breathe more life into the show's online identity, and most famous among installments like Cyber Assault, K9 Deja Who, and Eye of the TARDIS was The Last Dalek. Something only 90s kids will remember. The Last Dalek is an isometric 3D game with puzzle solving and shooter elements, commissioned by the BBC from the digital agency New Media Creative. Based on the premise of Rob Shearman's 2005 episode Dalek, and initially released in the wake of its broadcast, the player takes control of the Metaltron and assumes its role in breaking out of Van Statten's vault. The name of the game being to advance through 10 distinct levels consisting of numerous room maps and reaching the door marked as the exit without dying, with progression often requiring the collection of power-ups that allow the player to overcome an increasing variety of obstacles and hazards. As a browser game, the controls are naturally keyboard and mouse based, with movement determined by either the arrow keys or the WASD setup, whichever you prefer, the spacebar to access your inventory, and the point and click of the mouse to select an inventory item or to perform an in-game action like using your weapon. The Dalek's orientation is rigidly locked to 4 directions, so no true diagonal movement is possible here. But the map layout works in tandem with this control scheme by being pretty grid-like in construction, and there's even a power-up that gives your weaponry 360-degree range depending where you aim the mouse on screen. So it's a comfortable experience despite its inherent limitations, though you may occasionally get stuck on geometry due to iffy depth perception. Maybe I need to get good. Your Dalek is pretty bare bones to begin with, having to rely on its manipulator arm at first since even the gunstick starts off disabled, meaning there's a healthy selection of upgrades to seek out, some of them for power-ups that you've already collected. Side note, this is the sound effect that plays when you obtain one. Someone was feeling nostalgic. You are only permitted to equip 2 of them at any given time, so stopping to swap them out in the face of ever-diverse challenges is mandatory, especially since some of these abilities tend to be very situational. There's one specifically for decrypting locked doors, there's another one for revealing mines and camouflaged opponents, there's anti-gravity that lets you hover over pits, and so on. Such circumstances are relatively sporadic in each case, with each new room sporting different level design and thus varying obstructions to be worked around. That said, the shield and the speed boost can come in handy even outside of their required segment, so there is some leeway allowed in how often the player wants to use those. I mean, if you want to be a daredevil and face the enemies without the shield active,
You're welcome to try.
And yes, being a Dalek, extermination is naturally a large part of the equation and is even required in some areas, since select doors only open once all humans in the room have been killed, so no, you can't have a pacifist playthrough even if you wanted to. Though, come on, if you're playing this at all, it's because you're a sadist who wants to embody the part and massacre as many of Van Statten's helpless personnel as you can. Your victims even respawn if you leave the room and come back, allowing you to kill them all over again.
Grand Theft Auto got nothing on this.
Not that the resistance here is particularly challenging. At first, the Dalek only encounters harmless scientists who just run around like headless chickens and are easily mown down. But as the game goes on, the player will encounter guards and soldiers who do actually put up a fight, though they're little more than a mild nuisance and all go down in a couple of hits. And the same scream sound. There's also these proximity-triggered turret things. They can't be destroyed, but they do retreat into the ground if attacked enough and won't re-emerge until the player moves away. These things fascinated me as a kid because, well, they aren't in the television story. They were invented purely as obstacles for this game.
I guess they were just a notable anachronism for me. Autism!
Though the game in general takes a curious spin on Shearman's premise. The basic setup is essentially the same. The Metaltron breaks out of containment and goes on a killing spree, and there's a plethora of Easter eggs which tie back to the TV adventure. But since you're playing as the antagonist and the game is designed to be one, this creates a divergent narrative angle. It's kind of funny when you stop and think about it. Dalek the episode is a thoughtful exploration of the Dalek creature's ideology, as well as the Doctor's rage and survivor's guilt, deconstructing the self-loathing that can stem from fascist purity dogma, as well as what an all-consuming desire for revenge does to someone, as well as being something of a subtle meta-commentary on the show's sense of purpose at that point in time. It's a very rich character piece. And then the last Dalek game is just haha, evil tank go brrrr. By the penultimate level, the player has to outrace the closing bulkhead doors in the lead up to their encounter with the Doctor himself, who's armed with the alien gun he acquired from Adam's stash. He's the only character from the television episode to make an appearance here, and I guess in this version of events Rose isn't present to defuse the situation because he serves as the game's boss fight. There's a 3-blast pattern to his weaponry which the Dalek is assumedly meant to dodge and fire at an opening, but honestly I always just get up close and spam my shots until I deplete his health bar before he can drain mine. Once he's been killed,
yes, you killed the Doctor,
the player acquires his alien weapon, which is powerful enough to break through the bulkhead doors, and upon reaching the final level set inside the museum, the Doctor inexplicably returns for round 2 armed with the same weapon.
I guess he came back to life out of sheer spite.
But his strategy isn't really all that different. Just spam your fancy new weapon and you're good. Upon destroying the TARDIS in 3 blasts, which is curiously much less than it took to kill the Doctor, the game is won, ending with a results screen declaring the Daleks as victors of the Time War, sporting a total playtime and a grading on how well the player did. At this point, the opportunity to play again from the beginning with all power-ups immediately available is unlocked, which is a neat reward.
And that's the last Dalek.
In the end, it proved to be a relatively successful piece of promotion for the show. According to a BBC article from the time, it crossed 500,000 plays in the span of 3 weeks and was considered a spectacular hit. And anecdotally speaking, I've heard nothing but nostalgic fondness for the game in the years since. Sadly, this kind of content got phased out of Doctor Who's online identity around the time of the Capaldi era, and the subsequent retirement of Flash has relegated The Last Dalek and other such games to obscurity, but thankfully they're still accessible via downloadable preservation software such as Flashpoint, so feel free to check it out for yourself if you never experienced it, or if you did and want to relive a fond memory.
Anyone know why the Dalek hiccups when you exit the inventory though? Beats me.